My response is to Andrew Gomez and his question of whether or not it is ideal for nations to step into smaller, quote, smaller human rights violations. Um, I do agree with the notion that we will step in when there are major human rights violations, but we don't always do it. Darfur is a good example of us not stepping in. Syria is a good example of us not stepping in. Um, but we've also witnessed kind of the consequence of us stepping in where there are human rights violations. And granted, we could have a debate about what the stated merits were behind going into the war in Iraq. But when we stepped in, we created a serious power vacuum, and we also created a large animus against the United States, and we created recruiting fodder for organizations like ISIS and ISIL, and it becomes a problem for us to step in, not just from a practical standpoint, uh, with adding fuel to the fire for these terrorist organizations, but also from an economic standpoint. We can't just step into everything. We wouldn't have any money domestically. Um, but I think that we saw with President Obama's foreign policy, though a lot of people disagreed with it, one of the things that was a pillar or a tenet of his foreign policy or foreign diplomacy was to bring, encourage, lean on the large Western nations to come to the table and help push other countries, as well as sitting down with countries that do commit human rights violations and working on a relationship with them despite the fact that they commit human violations. And there was a really good article or an interview with President Obama where he stated that, do I want to sit down at the table with these people with human rights violations? No, because I know the atrocities they commit, but I know that it helps solidify a relationship that wouldn't be there otherwise if we just took the blanket statement or the blanket policy of refusing to deal with state actors who commit the human rights violations. So I think that the answer to your question is no, we should not step in to actually step in or put boots on the ground for every single human rights violation in other countries because they do have their own sovereignty. But I do think that we should have diplomatic ties with every country, especially the ones that commit the human rights violations, because that gives us a better opportunity to lean on them when they do commit those atrocities.